Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Human Echoes Recap.
I'm Tony Southcott.
And I'm Albert Berg, and today we're covering Game of Thrones Season 6, Episode 4, The Book of the Stranger.
This was an episode where I'm expecting it to kind of start slowing down, but it actually keep accelerating. This has been an awesome season for me so far.
I've heard a lot of people whining how the previous episodes was too slow, so for their sakes, I'm glad that this one wasn't. I also gotta say, just jumping right to the end of the episode, I kinda sorta called it, guys. If you listen to the previous episode, I nailed what, sort of more or less what Khaleesi was up to. Although I did like that, the way they involved, Jorah and Dario. Like, that they were part of the plot, but not so much of a part of the plot where it wasn't her doing her own thing and sort of, they didn't come in and save her. She was just able to use them and make her thing work.
They were kind of the spring in the trap, really. They were the ones that locked the doors.
Yes, and killed the guards and all that stuff. But she was definitely in charge of her own destiny there, and that's a great thing to see. But that's at the end of the episode. We'll talk about it further when we get there. But we start out this episode at the wall, as we have, I think, with basically every episode this season. And Jon is getting ready to leave. We saw at the end of the previous episode, he was like, all right, I'm done. I'm not the, commander anymore. I said my watch would end on the day that I died. I've been dead now, so I'm out. And for those of you who hate the Joseph Campbell Hero with a Thousand Faces thing and don't want to see the hero reject the call, you're getting that moment in this episode, but he gets turned around almost immediately when Sansa and Brienne show up, because he's basically about to walk out the door, and they're there, and he's like, oh, fine, I'll hang around.
That was actually a really good moment, though. I saw the creators talking about this after the show, that they've never actually been on camera together, Sansa and Jon.
Have they not?
Yeah, like over the course of the entire series, they said that they were never once on screen together. So this is kind of a strange reunion. We're getting to see it for the first time after 6 seasons.
I haven't gone back to season 1 in so long, so I didn't realize that even in season 1 they didn't interact directly. I guess not. No, he got sent off directly to the wall, right?
Yeah, and I was thinking maybe like they were briefly like there at the party or something like that, but really they didn't have any sort of actual interactions.
It is weirdly sad. I mean, not weirdly sad. It was extremely satisfying to see those two get back together, like to see all of these Starks have been scattered to the wind, and they've gone through so much crap, and to see those two get back together and have that genuine moment of, we found each other, we're back together, was just, I mean, the show kind of gives you a lot of brutality, and it beats you down pretty hard fairly often, but that moment was really, really kind of uplifting in a way.
Well, even the moments after that where they're just sitting in front of the fire talking together, and you're seeing Sansa actually smile for the first time in ages. Like, there's a different warmth there.
And her sort of realization that, and sort of reminding the audience, too, of, like, how far she's come as a character from kind of the spoiled, stuck-up, power-obsessed, maybe not power-obsessed, but she was like, I want to be the queen. It's going to be great. Yeah. And, how excited she was to run off and marry Joffrey, thank you. I'm terrible. I was so bad. I was like, wait, Khaleesi, what's her name? Bad tonight. I had my coffee and everything. It still sucks. But, I mean, she's come so far as a person. And Jon, too. I mean, he has the speech later on where he's talking about, all the stuff he's had to do, all the people he's had to kill, hanging a kid, which as much as some members of the audience really hated that kid, I think, in Jon's life, that's not something he was happy to do.
Yeah, like the kid was 10 to 12 years old. It left a mark. Especially because Ollie was kind of his squire for a while.
Yeah, they were friends, more or less. I mean, he gave Ollie advice. Ollie had his back, We saw Ollie grow kind of as a character and sort of get his own backbone. Anyway, I have a problem with the people who completely hate Ollie, but that's... you can enjoy the show however you want to.
But as they're sitting there talking, we end up... Actually, there's a little bit more. The reunion doesn't show exactly what happens later whenever they get a letter about the flayed men and everything else that's going on.
Yeah, that's near the end of the episode. At the end of this scene, though, we do have a bit with Davos and Melisandre where Melisandre says, I've taken orders from Jon Snow. He was the prince that was promised. And Davos is like, I kind of thought that was my boy. And Melisandre said, yeah. She doesn't say anything. But it's one of those moments where we're seeing her kind of doubting herself, trying to figure out what exactly she believes. Davos, as sort of his loyalty is to the king, who we find out from Brienne later on is dead. If we believe her, we never saw that sword actually fall.
I think they made it clear enough, but this is a show that relishes in actually showing you character death, so I would say it's probably true, especially because Brienne isn't the type to lie very often.
But it's not like they didn't have the budget for a beheading or that they're afraid to show gore. I don't understand it's just like with the Hound. They didn't show his death. It's not like they couldn't have shown it. They're leaving these things open to at least possibly come back later.
Yeah, if they end up in dire need of another Baratheon or something like that, I suppose.
I don't think it's haphazard. I don't think they're being like, we might need these characters back. Let's not 100% kill them off. I think that it's with purpose, but I could be wrong. I mean, and maybe they're just playing with us. Maybe Stannis really is dead, but I have not been convinced yet. I think I'm about a 50-50 right now on Stannis being dead.
I'm about an 80-20 as far as him being dead, just because I trust in Brienne more than most people.
Well, unfortunately, someone who isn't dead is little Lord Aaron and Littlefinger, because the next scene we see him being really terrible at archery.
Yeah, I keep expecting some little tragic accident to befall Robin, but I guess Littlefinger needs him around for a little bit longer.
Yeah, there's two characters in the show that I can't... Well, Robin, I get. Littlefinger needs him because nominally the power is his, and Littlefinger can easily manipulate him, which we see really much in this scene. But the other person who I can't believe hasn't been knocked off yet is the Maester in King's Landing.
Yeah, and he's starting to take a bigger role. Like, for all of last season, he was kind of shamed, and now he's just kind of working his way back up.
You think he's... No. The actual Maester, not the guy who made Frankenmountain.
That's what I'm talking about. Like, he was kind of ignored for a while, and now all of a sudden he's still ignored.
Nobody likes that guy. Nobody's listening to him. Nobody's like, wow, great advice, dude. I don't understand how that guy is still alive.
I'm surprised he survived the dungeons with how old he is. I know he's more spry than he lets on, but still.
Maybe. There are characters where there are extra depths to them, and then there are characters that are exactly what they appear to be. And he's one of those characters that's exactly... And Robin Arryn, too, which we'll get back to that. So that was a really fascinating... really, it's just kind of a recap for the audience of this is how this power struggle is working. Not struggle, but the power set up is... He's got the real power. He's being puppeted by Littlefinger. And... he's kind of insane to the point where, someone who's been loyal to him and a friend to his house for his entire life, Littlefinger, just kind of sort of casts a little bit of an aspersion on him, and he's like, oh, should we throw him through the moon door? And is disappointed when Littlefinger says, let's maybe not. Let's give him another chance. Like, oh, fine. He's kind of... He's one of those guys, sort of like Ramsay and the guys in the north who are making alliance with him, who think that they'll benefit from it. He almost, I think, he's unpredictable enough, maybe, that Littlefinger could get himself in trouble.
Probably. Like, I could definitely see that becoming a thing where all of his plans are undone because he can't control like a 13-year-old boy.
Yeah, I mean, Littlefinger's good, and I'm not saying he probably has taken that into consideration, but this is definitely the best play that he can do to pull himself up higher than he already is. But it's one of those things where Robin Arryn is a real wild card. Not as much as Ramsay, but you don't want to lean too hard on him because he's that sharpened stick that'll just go right through your hand.
I always figured it was just him biding his time with the Eyrie and still having control over it, so...
Well, they talk about they're going to go to... he sort of basically says, hey, let's go invade Winterfell, which, it is... He puts it in a way where it's, it makes sense, like, oh, let's go rescue your cousin, but it's really, let's go take Winterfell, and we'll have Winterfell.
Yeah, and I'm sure it wouldn't take much to convince the Knights of the Vale to go out there after what happened with Catelyn Stark and everything.
That's true. I mean, he has a good reason to go, but he's not going for that reason. He's just using that reason.
Yeah. Just another kingdom he wants to control.
Moving on to Tyrion and the people at Meereen. Tyrion is making a deal with the Masters of Astapor, and there's another city that I forgot the name of.
Yeah, it's like Junkai or something like that. There's
Junkai and Astapor. Yeah, I think you're correct.
It's at least close to that. It ends with Kai, but the leaders of these three different sects, and they sit down to talk about what it would take for them to basically stop funding the Sons of the Harpy.
And Tyrion is a master of compromise, is the right word for that. He's there and he says, hey, listen, we're getting rid of slavery, but and this is one of those really tricky things because Daenerys is not a compromiser. She's just like, you do what I say, this is the right way, and that has gotten a lot of people to follow her. Tyrion is not the kind of person that you're like gung-ho to follow, but his plan probably is a better plan.
Well, they based this off of Abraham Lincoln trying to offer something to the South to get rid of slavery. Like,
oh, did they?
Yeah,
I didn't get to watch the post-episode discussion. I got started a little bit late, so I had to be ready here for the podcast.
Yeah.
Talk about that.
D.B. Weiss and the other creator, I can't remember his name right now, were talking about how they based this on Abraham Lincoln trying to offer a 7-year compromise to the South to avoid the Civil War. And that they just figured that Tyrion would be the type of person that would be like, there's a lot of ways of doing this, and 7 years sucks for the slaves, but in the end, if they can't keep the kingdom running, it's not going to matter for the slaves.
Well, and, they don't show it as much in the show, but they do talk about it a little bit, and they really go into it in the books of what this cataclysmic change that that Khaleesi has instituted really has done to the city. And there are slaves who come to her and they say, hey, it wasn't so bad where I was being a slave. Now you've killed my master and I'm out begging on the streets. At least before I had like a meaningful profession and I had something that, meant something. And there is something to be said for this slow phasing out where, they can figure out, okay, what will I do? What will my profession be? Because not even all the slaves aren't necessarily about like, yeah, slavery's bad, we're going to end it. And I think they had that moment in the show where the guy comes to her and says like, I was a slave and it, that was maybe the best thing that had happened to me. And now everything sucks for me. So there is some wisdom to this, but the people who are following Khaleesi are following her because of her sort of heavy-handed stance, and they're not 100% happy with Tyrion.
Yeah, Grey Worm, and I always mispronounce this girl's name. It's like Medici, I think, or Missandei. Yes. They're even having a hard time like wanting to translate for him because they're like, she's mad about it. She's telling him like, you don't understand anything about what it is. Like 7 years is a long time for a slave. And, like, even though Tyrion has been technically sold into slavery, it was not for very long.
It still doesn't change the fact that his plan is probably the best plan. And I think it was interesting that they do get on board with him, right? Even though they're like, you can see how uncomfortable they are with this compromise that he's making as he's making it. When they go out to sell it to the other people, the other guys who are following Khaleesi, and they're like, what are you guys doing? Why are you compromising? You can't trust these guys. They do get behind Tyrion because at the very least they're willing to see that he's not stupid. He's not just throwing everything away. He's trying to find some kind of middle ground, and they trust him enough to sort of smooth things over with those guys.
Yeah, and a lot of their problems come straight up from the mistrust of the slavers.
Which is well earned.
Yeah.
I mean, those guys aren't good guys.
No, not at all. And as far as them going against their word 5 years from now, 7 years from now, all that makes a lot of sense that they would be in that situation and that they would be so skeptical, but they're kind of putting a little bit of faith in Tyrion.
Yeah, it's difficult to say. I mean, the show may not go out that long, and the fact that it is taken from Abraham Lincoln trying to make a deal before the Civil War does not necessarily bode well for this deal.
Yeah, probably not.
I don't know if they're going to keep going down that road or if they'll, if it'll turn out to be. But it does seem like the sensible approach, and you gotta admire Tyrion for at least trying it, because he doesn't have the manpower to just go in there and smash him.
He also doesn't have a whole lot going for him there. Nobody knows who he is. He's just the foreign dwarf on the top of the pyramid.
Right, and that's one thing, the great exchange that they have, where they say, "Hey, those guys just look at us and see us as things," and he says, "And they see me the same way. I'm just some grotesque dwarf," which kinda you would think somebody. I mean, his sister has that giant price put on his head. You would think somebody would put together that the really well-spoken, leadership-trained dwarf in Marine was maybe somebody who they should know about. But
yeah, but they're also knowing that they have to go through an army of Unsullied to get to him. Usually.
Yeah, but if here's the thing, if Tyrion makes too many people uncomfortable, somebody's going to figure it out.
Yeah.
And that could end up being bad for him. We'll have to see. But moving on to the other part of the plot, we have Jorah and Dario on the trail of I keep wanting to say Khaleesi, and that's not her real name.
Yeah, it's Daenerys.
Daenerys, thank you. Dag nabbit. Sunday night at 10 o'clock for me is not a great time to remember all the Game of Thrones names.
You could also pick one of her 16 titles. I'm sure people will forgive
the
you.
Mother of Dragons. But
Breaker of Chains, so on and so forth.
They're looking for him. They have kind of a fun little back and forth where Dario's poking fun at Jorah, basically saying, like, "Listen, I can barely keep up with this woman in the sack. You do not know what you want." And Jorah's like, just shut up. And he's right, though. Jorah is old.
Yeah, I didn't realize that they had him kind of cast as like a 60-some-year-old man because the actor is probably in his 40s. Like, I didn't know that he was that much older in the books.
I mean, he may not be that old in the show. They kind of play around with the ages a little bit. Like when Daenerys was first married off to Drogo, she was like 12 in the books. So they've aged her up a little bit, and aged some other people down. But still, he's not in his prime. He's very much past his prime, and he's sick with the grayscale, if you've forgotten, which we find, Dario finds out about. He sees the patch, and he's like, "Dude, you know what's going to happen?" And Jorah says, "Yeah, I know what's going to happen." And I don't know what's going to happen. I mean, we know that he turns into some kind of a thing, but do they become like monsters, or is those just the people who are living in the swamps?
Yeah, are those just desperate raiders with the stone skin disease? Like, do they end up being like lepers where they start having like a finger fall off and just all that gross stuff, or what happens? So, we'll see more about that.
But they get into a fight. They have to leave all their weapons behind, or at least they're supposed to leave their weapons behind because, plot reasons. Basically. And Jorah gets just beat down pretty bad by one of the Dothraki that find them.
Yeah, it's one of the main lieutenants of the main call.
Which Jorah is a good fighter with a sword. I mean, I think if he had his sword, he'd probably be okay because he is a knight and he could hold his own. But he doesn't have that.
Armorless and unarmed against like a guy that's about 8 inches taller than him.
And well trained and not sick and used to fighting hand to hand. Yes, but Dario comes back and saves him with a knife that he'd held onto, and there's not too much more to that scene.
He's very connected to that knife.
Yeah, I kept expecting somebody to make a penis joke about that. Like I'm connected to a different dagger, dude. But they didn't go that way, so.
And then to hide the fact that he stabbed the dude, he just bashes the dude's face in with a rock like 16 times. It was a little gratuitous, but it worked.
I felt like it was it was fine. For Game of Thrones, it didn't actually show the guy's head getting beat into a pulp, so it was off screen.
Yeah. Gotta love the sound effects, though.
We see Daenerys with the queens just kind of setting up again what's going to happen. They're like, you're going to get tried. Hopefully you'll stay with us. She's like, nah, I'm not going to stay with you guys. I've got other plans. And then she meets up with Jorah and Dario, and as we mentioned before, kind of makes plans with them. I really did love the moment between her and the other Khaleesi, which she even called her Khaleesi. I thought that was interesting because, that's sort of their word for queen. And it was neat to see her and them kind of talking together, and her, the other queen being like, "You really have a dragon? That's so awesome!"
Yeah, it was kind of a moment of reverence, even though she doesn't really have a call or anything like that anymore.
So, and it's sort of set up. They in that moment also they kind of set up the politics of you have the old Khaleesi's who don't like foreigners, and then you have the younger ones who are kind of more willing to. I don't know if bend the rules is exactly right, but they don't hate her quite as much, which I think will come into play later with what happens at the end of the episode. But she meets up with Jorah and Dario. They make their plan, and then we get to switch to Marjorie and the Sept with the guy who's becoming maybe my favorite character in the show, Tony, the High Sparrow.
Oh, it's so interesting because he's such the kind villain. And, he might not even really be a villain, but he's a villain to, all these people and all these moving parts happening in King's Landing right now.
It's so interesting. And we talked about this last week ad nauseum, so I won't talk about it too much. But the fact that he at least seems to be using the truth as his greatest weapon, where he talks about, what made him change. And I keep expecting to see, under the armor, that there's some nefarious thing going on under the skin. And there's some part of me that I think wants that to be the case. Because if there's somebody this quote-unquote good in the world of Game of Thrones, it's kind of... It's a little bit shaming in a way to most of the other people who at the very least have very dark shades of gray going on.
It's like you're going to just find a scene where he's surrounded by, naked men and women, and they're feeding him grapes and something like that while he's getting oral, just some little thing that's gonna break down the walls.
But we haven't seen that yet, and we may not, Tony. I've prepared to. This show has made you expect the worst in people, but with him, it may not come out. That he may actually be what he appears to be. He may be just like Robin Arryn and. Not Septon, the Maester, where he's not like them, but where there's not some deeper layer. He is what he appears to be, and the story he tells her is really effective, I thought.
Yeah, where he goes into just seeing the wealth and opulence and everything else, and all the time that he would put into these shoes, and just how false it was, the narrative he was telling about himself.
Well, right, and the fact that he's shoeless now, kind of that even carries more significance. The fact that he sees that as sort of the symbol of opulence, the ultimate, from where he came from. But Marjorie saying to him, "Oh, did you go through the graveyard and see that all men were going to die and that it was futile?" And his description of what actually happened, that party, he says, "No, it wasn't the graveyard; it was a party." And how he woke up after the party and saw everybody naked and, great, most of us regular people don't look that good naked, and we, and this is Game of Thrones time, which is one of the first times we've ever really talked about what people smell like in this universe.
Yeah, behind the perfumes and colognes, behind everything else that they were trying to hide, he saw what they were.
Yeah, smelled their, sort of body odor, smelled and the food. The fact that he talks about the food starting to go bad already, because of the lack of refrigeration. And, it was just such a great moment where you really understood what this guy's deal is and where he comes from, that he's not this, he's not a hater in that's part of, idea of the word. He just realized how worthless all of this, other stuff was.
They've gotten a lot of mileage out of that one little set where he likes to hang out, the Nameless Temple or whatever it was.
It's really nicely lit, isn't it?
It's perfect every time.
You never see. I guess you see the other side occasionally, but it seems like that the wall away from those lights is usually when they're shooting from. Probably it's not actually a wall. I imagine it's a a built thing, and they just move that away so they can have the cameras move around easier. But it is. He's in there a lot, and it looks it's really pretty. And less pretty is the cell where Marjorie's brother's being held, where he says, "Hey, go talk to your brother."
He is not taking confinement well.
He is not. Marjorie's sort of like been standing up to it the whole time, and like you can't bring me down. I've got it. And he's like, "Just make it stop. I just don't want to go home." And she's like, she's not necessarily disgusted with him, but I'm disgusted with him.
Yeah. Well, she's always been a little bit more fearless, a little bit more like stronger than her brother was. Like, she was willing to marry Joffrey, and she knew what he was, and she was fully willing to manipulate him and do whatever she had to do to become the queen. Like, so she's just made of a little bit stronger stuff than Loras is.
Yeah, but still, Loras. I mean, she tries to get him like, come on, man, like we gotta stand strong against these people. He's like, oh no, he doesn't. He doesn't actually break down crying, but what a wuss. Just, dude. I'm sick of him. I'm just annoyed that you didn't put up more. I mean,
well, he's like a full-on knight and one of the most skilled fighters in all the realm. You'd think he'd be able to like handle being in a box for a little bit.
I guess.
But who knows what they're doing to him too? Like it might be more than just one lady talking to him. They might be beating him. They might be doing all sorts of stuff.
I think mostly it's starvation. They sort of give them like water and maybe some gruel and nothing much else. Although we don't see them sort of wasting away in this, but they don't seem like the kind of people who are going to torture, like stick needles under your fingernails or something. That's not the methodology that I'm seeing.
Yeah, their game is basically wait until they confess. That's all they're doing, really. And he's going to crack a lot sooner than Marjorie will. And we'll see what the fallout from that is.
Well, and we have sort of the intersecting plot lines coming back, because the next scene is Cersei and Tormund and the small council. And, Tormund tells her what the High Sparrow told him. And I was trying to remember, what specifically did the High Sparrow say that he shouldn't tell her?
I kind of wonder if they cut away from that, because I couldn't remember either. Like, I think that was how that particular scene ended, is that like we were left in the dark.
Okay, so it's not something I was thinking. I didn't go back to the previous episode. I was thinking, did I miss something there?
I texted 3 different people asking if they could remember, and none of them could. So I think it was something that got cut out. It could be related to his parentage. If we're completely wrong, please hit up the comments and let us know, because I'm really curious.
Yeah, either on the YouTube comments if you're watching this on YouTube, or you can tweet us at HE Podcast. Please tell us when we're wrong. We're certainly not so proud that we can't take some criticism and correction. But whatever he told her, and maybe it didn't have anything directly to do with that, but she goes into the small council, talks to the
Tyrells.
What's the last name? Tyrells. Thank you. Talks to the Tyrells and hatches a plan to get Marjorie out of there and get the High Sparrow out of power.
And also, they're bringing it in because the Hand of the King right now is also a Lannister. He's the brother of Tywin, and his son Lancel is basically one of the High Sparrow's goons, and he just wants him back too.
Which is, what does he think is going to happen there? Lancel, Marjorie and them are being held hostage. Lancel's just, he chose that, right?
Yeah, but there's also, the idea of, if you lose somebody to a cult, what are you going to do? You take them back to Casterly Rock and, basically get them out of it for a little while.
Maybe. It doesn't seem like that's going to go really well for him, but because they're going to bring in the army and they're going to be fighing, and
yeah, they're bringing the full force of House Tyrell in, and that way the King's Landing troops don't have to be the ones that stop the High Sparrow and his forces.
Yes, because the King has specifically forbade them to go against the High Sparrow. I'm thinking that this is Cersei trying to get Marjorie killed.
Very well could be.
but I don't know exactly how that play goes because she does want the High Sparrow out. I mean, that is an interest of hers, and I don't know how she accomplishes both, but it seems like she's definitely not the kind of person to be like, oh, wow, let's all work I mean, she is, enemy of enemy, my enemy thing definitely plays in here, but there's something about that kind of makes me think she's playing a deeper, more sinister game with them.
Yeah, it's like in the middle of combat, if something were to all of a sudden happen, especially if all of a sudden the mountain gets involved and Marjorie accidentally falls on a blade, it wouldn't surprise anybody.
It certainly wouldn't surprise me. It might surprise the people who she planned with, but it's not going to surprise me.
Yeah, I think even the Tyrells wouldn't be that surprised. They would just want her head.
Well, we'll see how that plays out. But moving on to Theon, he got on a really fast ship and made it back to the Pike. This is one of those things where I'm sure it took him, weeks or months or whatever, but we don't see things. The way that time unfolds in the show, I think if you drilled right down and tried to make it make sense, especially with how it's
seems like one of those things that George R.R. Martin would make it take a lot more time to get to where he was, and the show people were like, all right, come on, let's go.
Well, you would still, I think George R.R. Martin would still have him. I mean,
they would probably just space the death.
Point, but he would just talk about it, like, he'd been on the ship for 3 months and, walking for 2 months before that or something.
Yeah.
But then how close is Winterfell to the wall, because Sansa was able to make it to the wall in the same amount of time since then.
And it's like, how long has Jon been back alive? Like a day or two?
Right. So it seems like again, if you drilled right down into exactly when is all this stuff happening, you might get a headache, but it's okay. We don't have to do that because we can enjoy the show as it happens. That's the wonderful thing about movies, Tony. Sometimes you don't have to be exactly 100% on every plot point. If it makes sense in the flow of the show, it's okay.
Yeah. And this is the third time in this episode that we've seen siblings reuniting. Like, we had Jon and Sansa, Marjorie and Loras, Theon and Yara. Like, it's a lot of people kind of getting back together.
That's a good point. I forgot about that. The title of this show is Book of the Stranger. Those of you who don't know, the Stranger is the god of death. So when you're at the House of White, Black and White, when they're they serve the god of death. When Arya's Dancing Mancer said, "What do we say to the god of death? Not today." They're talking about the Stranger. That is their god. They're sort of nominally worshiping the seven, but like just one of the seven.
It's more just focusing on that one part of like the star or whatever it is.
And I never totally understood. We talked about this before the episode, but I didn't quite get exactly how the title played in thematically for the whole episode.
I mean, there is some death happening in here, but it's not.
Well, not anything more than we usually see on Game of Thrones. There's just So the fact that you mentioned that brothers and sisters getting back together, I thought maybe we should have had a title that related to that.
Yeah.
That's the only reason I brought that up, because I thought, yeah, that's actually a running theme in this episode, that we got siblings reunited. I don't know what Game of Thrones-y type title you would give it, but there certainly is a lot of that. And it really is a great, moment where, that he sees his sister and she's pissed at him. For good reason. For those of you who don't remember, she was, I think in season 3, went to try to rescue him from Ramsay, and he was like, "No, I ain't going," which was a bit of a weak plot thread. I felt like in the moment that thread wasn't great.
Yeah, because they basically got the box with his dick in it, and she put together her best people to go rescue him. And whenever she gets there, he's just like, he's Reek, and he doesn't have anything redeeming, and he doesn't go back with her.
Well, yeah, she gets to where he is after all the fighting that she does, and she's like, "Come back with me," and he's like, "No," and she's like, "Okay," and leaves. That's a little bit oversimplifying it, but it was somewhat unsatisfying to me.
It definitely felt like a lot of effort. They should have just knocked his ass out and brought him with.
Well, especially because it felt like filler, right? It felt like, all right, you have it's sort of like the stuff where they went to, not Dothraki, the Sand Snakes thing.
Yeah.
Where they went to go and get...
Yeah, out in Dorne.
What's her face?
Like, whenever Jaime
Dorne.
And everybody went over there.
It's sort of like, it's a big loop that they're taking where they go to Dorne and then they come back, and the only thing we really accomplish is we meet the Sand Snakes and we kill off the daughter of the queen. So this was another one of those plot points that felt sort of like it didn't really go anywhere. This character just goes to one place and then goes back to the place where they originally were. However, the way that they pay it off in this almost makes it worth it, because she really just lays into him with what is wrong with you? How dare you show your face back here? You know, everybody sacrificed so much to get you back. People died. You were my brother, and I was there for you, and you just, you know, didn't want to go, and now you show back up when Dad just died, and you're like, I want to be the king. Shut up and get out of here. And he's like, no, that's not. I don't want to be the king. Okay, I just want to not be persecuted anymore. Yeah. I'll help you out.
He just says that he wants her to be the in charge. He wants her to have the Salt Throne, and he wants to help.
And it's not unexpected from his perspective, but I didn't expect her to come down as hard as she did on him, and I was glad that she did. Not because he deserves it. Well, you know what? He kind of deserves it. He was a real bastard for a while there. But, you know, he's definitely been through enough to sort of, as a watcher of the show, I'm like, okay, I can kind of forgive you at this point. Like, I don't have to hate you because you've been through enough crap where all the crap that you pulled has sort of been balanced out, but still, it was interesting to see that play out, because it did sort of add weight to what we'd seen previous. And I like that. I like that they're kind of going back, and even though there was some of that stuff that didn't hold up as well, that they still make it have consequences later on.
Yeah. And it just shows that they've had the story from some of the older shows and bringing it back. So it was a good thing.
Excuse me. We almost wrap up going forward to or back to Winterfell. Sorry, not wrapping up. Two more scenes after this. But Winterfell, Ramsay and Asha trying to work her magic on Ramsay. This was a tough scene to watch.
Yeah, because she's just reaching, and there's one point where he pops the weirdest boner ever. You can just see it on his face. And
it's such a bastard, yeah. Literally and figuratively.
Yeah, that's why we're going to be seeing the Snow Bowl soon. But
the Bastard Bowl, yeah. As the people on Reddit are saying.
I guess he is a Bolton now, so it's not really the Snow Bowl, but the Bastard Bowl. And because he tortured, I keep wanting to call him Alfie, but it's Theon so much, he knows exactly how Asha got the kids away from him. And so she's trying to get close, and she's maybe an inch and a half away, just reaching as hard as she can to grab that knife, and he just brings it up and slices her right in the neck.
And it was so, I mean, they held on her hand there so frequently and so long. I was like, come on, kill him.
But the thing is,
hate him.
We've talked about plot armor on different shows before. He's got enough plot armor that the only person that's going to take him out is going to be Jon Snow or Sansa or something like that. Maybe you could have Brienne do it, but it's not going to be Asha.
The one redeeming thing about that, well, you know what? I would really like for him to be taken out by a complete nobody. Giant middle finger right in his face. It's not some big knight. It's not some warrior. It's not, Azor Ahai, yeah. For those of you who know the book. It's just some random nobody, and Asha would have been great.
I mean, I would prefer he dies of syphilis, but,
or falls on, just something.
My bet is he's going to get fed to some hounds.
I will say I was glad that wasn't a more brutal scene. We didn't see him being particularly cruel to her. He just stabs her, and he's like, yeah, I knew. Yeah. And
it's it's her dying over the course of 30 seconds instead of her tying him to a giant X and brutalizing her.
Yeah, that would, or feeding her to dogs, or, babies killing. In the scale of Game of Thrones stuff, this was pretty mild.
It was clean.
And especially
comparatively.
So, I did love her sort of banter with him where, he says, didn't you see the people I flayed? And she said, did you eat them afterwards? He said, no. It's like, yeah, I've seen worse.
Yeah, that was the...
She kind of has.
That was the moment where, like, I was like, he just popped the weirdest boner. That look on his face. Like, I really don't like Ramsay that much as a character, but the guy that's playing him is doing a good job with all this.
Well, yes. he's you don't like him as a character because that guy's playing him really well. I'm watching Legends of Tomorrow, and there's some villains who are less compelling than that on that show. It's not gonna different show.
We said that there was 2 scenes left, but there's one more, and this is where you actually see the reaction where Jon Snow gets the letter and is going through it and reading what Ramsay is basically threatening him with right now.
Yes, which was really impressive because he kind of, he gets to the part, like where, we're going to kill people and stuff, and then he kind of stops reading, and you can tell that's not all, and Sansa's like, that's not all. And he's like, no, it's enough. And she like grabs it and reads it out loud to him and says, Ramsay's threatening to rape her in front of him and then, feed Rickon to the dogs in front of him and then cut out his eyes and then let him die. And really... showing a lot of strength because she's holding his feet to the fire. She's like, you're not going to turn away. You're not going to not read this. You're going to face what he said he was going to do, and you're going to do something about it.
Yeah, she's just become so much of a stronger character, and it sucks, like, the awfulness that she had to go through to get to this point, but it's so much better to watch her now than it used to be.
Well, and it's one of those situations, too, similar to how, with Tyrion and the slaves, where they're talking back and forth, and you can tell they're, like, neither one of them is really wrong. Tyrion is saying it's better that we compromise and actually get something done, and, and they're like, slavery sucks, we need to get rid of it right now. And they both have really good points, and in this scene, Jon and Sansa both have really good points. Jon is like, I have killed so many people. I don't want to kill. And he's just it's not like warrior killing. It's it's been people that he trusted and people that he cared about, and it over and over and over he's seen all this fighting just come to nothing. And he's like, just let me stop. And she's like, you can't stop. We got and you know where both of them are coming from, and neither one of them is like wrong. He's wrong in a sense because he's sort of kind of chickening out, but you really empathize with why he's chickening out.
Been flayed pretty much. Like, he got stabbed like 8 times by his friends. So it's definitely a little bit of PTSD there. We also get to see something that's a little bit interesting in the fact that Tormund really, really likes Brienne. Like, there's some tension there. And it's got to be weird for her because her being one of the only women that's in the entirety of Castle Black, she's probably not used to the attention that she's getting.
Well, she's probably not used to people looking like at her in that way at all.
Yeah.
Like, Tormund, I think, probably has a very different... He's the guy who had sex with the bear. Yeah. So somebody pointed out in the Reddit thread, he had sex with a bear. She killed a bear. They're perfect for each other.
You imagine those, 9-foot-tall babies. They'd be restarting the Frost Giants.
It kind of makes me sad for the little bit of romance we saw between her and Jaime back in the day, though.
Yeah, true.
Like, he really seemed like he respected her, and he was kind of maybe into her. At least in a... I don't know. I mean, he's definitely got the hots for Cersei still, but he doesn't respect Cersei. Yeah. So... That would be interesting to see how that plays out.
Whereas, Brienne actually saved his life, and they went back and forth doing that for a while. They had quite an adventure.
Yeah, man, I forgot about all that stuff. There's a lot of Game of Thrones, many, many hours of stuff to watch if you want to go back into it. But there is one more season after this, Tony.
It's a lot to wrap up, but it's getting closer and closer and closer.
The Dothraki have Daenerys on trial. And, like I said, I was right. She was going to burn him. Or get burned. Somehow, I was like, I know she's going to get burned. I thought she was going to try to manipulate them into burning her at the stake. But her plan,
her plan is way better than what we thought. Like, that she would be on a pyre or something like that, and people would see her not burn and just be, in awe. No, she's just going to burn them alive.
Which kind of, what is in those burner things? Are they filled with kerosene?
It was definitely oil the way things were splashing.
Okay, because it looked like there were coals in there, and then when she threw them out, like pushed them over, it splashed everywhere, and I thought, what is going on?
But that, like, the way it moved, it was definitely, like, filled with oil, even if those braziers are usually filled with coals. It worked for the scene.
And there were some people questioning from the book whether, she's supposed to be able to do that. I don't know what the book is going to do when she gets to that point, but I think that really, if they establish that she can survive being burned, I think she even, like, did some other stuff in the seasons following or previous where she was holding her hands over the flame.
Yeah, where like they picked up one of the dragon eggs and it burned her friend, but it didn't burn her. Like there's like 4 or 5 different little instances, and those ones, like, you could say like it wasn't fully using that power since it's only supposed to be a use one time thing, but like whenever she survived the pyre at the end of season 1, and whenever she survives this, the entire immolation of their temple. It's definitely using that if it's a one-time only thing.
Yeah, I don't think it's one time. It's definitely not one time only in the show. And some people have said George R. R. Martin said that was supposed to be one time only, but the book does not make that 100% clear. It kind of sort of hints that maybe that was the case, but I was really happy that they brought it back. Plus, there was the whole thing with the feeding her brother the molten crown, and she says at that point, like, well, he's not a dragon because dragons don't burn.
Yep.
And again, all of that setup really, I think, brings you to the idea that she can survive being burned, guys. I'm just you can't be the mother of dragons if they can burn you alive.
Yeah. It'd be a lot harder to ride a dragon into combat if you had to worry about, like, that flame splashback.
Yeah. Well, you do have to worry about being nude after that.
Which I thought I'd read that she was done with doing, like, the gratuitous nude scenes, so I'm not sure if that was a body double or not. I'm sure somebody's going to go and compare what she looked like in season 1 to now and see if it was the same body, but she's still looking good. Yeah.
Well, okay, first of all, gratuitous is... What I had heard that she said was that she was done with that stuff when it wasn't going to move the story forward, right? Like, if it's not essential to the moment, she didn't want to be going topless.
Yeah,
and I understand that. Some people last week were disappointed when they ripped her top off and they didn't show anything. I was like, well, it doesn't, like, there's no impact there. It doesn't mean anything to see her boobs there except because, hey, boobs. And you can get that somewhere else.
It almost seems like they've tamed that down a little bit. Like, even when Tyrion brought in the 3 whores for the delegates or whatever.
The masters?
Yeah, for the masters. Like, they were still clothed. Like, it seems like back in the day, that would have been like, oh, we're giving full frontal. Like,
maybe they wanted to, like, just sort of, like, make everybody wait for the real show in this episode. I don't know, and I don't know if those were actually her boobs or not. I'm not gonna, like...
Yeah, we're not gonna go
back and compare. It's fine. It worked fine for the episode. Emilia Clarke can keep her clothes on if she wants to keep her clothes on. That is her prerogative. But I did. So she mentioned she didn't want to go topless, but just for no reason, which I think that this is definitely a good reason in the show. But she also said there should be like a 1-to-1 correlation for the topless scenes and schlong scenes. So we might be up for some penis stuff in the episodes to come.
Well, they gave some fan service to the ladies with Jon Snow being naked on the table. They didn't show dong, but they did show, like, most everything else.
Yeah, they didn't. That's what I'm saying. They didn't. That. Well, it's arguable how much that matters. I'm a guy. I don't need you to see my junk.
Yeah, I don't really care to see more Laura scenes. Like, I mean, that's not enriching my Game of Thrones experience. I'm sure there's a sect of the population that's all about that. But it might
enrich somebody's Game of Thrones experience, and I think that's the point of the argument. I understand where she's coming from, and if it's going to be a show with nudity, it should be equal opportunity.
Well, they can keep working on that. I'm sure there's somebody keeping count.
That will wrap it up for this episode.
I feel like we kind of glossed over the end and how awesome that was. Like, maybe it's because we've seen it a little bit before that it lost a tiny bit of impact. But, like, seriously, like, I was just like, oh, yes! I was so happy.
No, I really did like that. I don't mean to gloss over it, but she wins. She wins big. She does what I said. She has the Dothraki army potentially behind her, like all
Yeah,
of them united.
It's not just one Khalasar either. It's all the different Khalasars, like, at that place. Probably 100,000 people. Let's say maybe a quarter of that to half of that is able-bodied men for taking over the sea. That's a huge army. Like, you're talking about Tormund having 2,000, and maybe the Greyjoys, if they joined up, would bring some people. Like, a good-sized army right now is in the 5 to 10,000 range. And she's done way, way more than that.
Do you think she's going to have trouble getting them on ships?
I'm sure she's going to have trouble with some, but she could also at least take care of the problems in Marine with all those people.
That's true. That's true. I know that, like, back when she was, you know, her original Dothraki people were like, we are not... No, that's not... We don't get on ships.
They don't trust,
and,
they don't trust water their horses can't drink and things like that.
Right, and to take them across onto the, you know, into Westeros is really going to be a trick. But I think it's going to happen. I think eventually that's got. I don't know if that'll be this season. Probably close to the end of this season.
Yeah. I think that is going to wrap it up. Like, the only other thing we could talk about is the preview for next week, but that's mostly speculation. They show a little bit of Bran looking into the future, seeing the coming ice armies.
Who was that woman talking to Varys and Tyrion?
It was straight up another, like, Lord of Light priestess. So...
Okay, so it's not somebody we've seen before.
No.
It's another one of those things where I was like, am I supposed to know who that is? I have no idea.
The only time we've seen another Lord of Light person, and I'm not sure if this was the same person, is when they were walking through the streets in Marine talking about all the problems they were facing. And there were people gathered around, like, someone talking about it. I can't remember if it was this girl, but she has the same look and the same amulet around her neck. So I'm guessing...
I wonder if she's also super old.
Maybe that's a requirement. Gotta go find, like, some haggard lady just to, like, prove it.
I guess. I don't know how that works. I mean, hopefully we'll find some of that out. That was one of those things. It's like, well, there's a big reveal, and then you think, I don't know where they're going with that. You know, that was episode 1, right?
Yeah, that was the end of episode 1.
And they haven't really gone. I mean, not that we need to go back to seeing the old lady or anything, but it does. If you're gonna put that out there, you need to sort of make it significant going forward. And I would like for that to pay off a little bit more before the end of the season.
I saw someone talking about how it might not be that she's really old, but that it takes her own life force to do the things that she does, and it just saps her. That it's like a form of glamour over it. Like, it's just, there's a lot of different fan theories out there. There's people who think that, like, the mountain actually has Joffrey's head. There's a lot of really dumb stuff out there, so we shouldn't parrot all of it.
I love that theory. I love the theory that he has Joffrey's head. Are you kidding me? I'm gonna take the helmet off and there's Joffrey and he's got like all gray and stuff. Oh! Okay, we have to stop that. That's not gonna get better than that. That's amazing. That's probably not true, but it's true in my head right now, and it's just a wonderful feeling.
Yeah, it's true until that helmet gets knocked off.
We didn't even give a potential spoiler for that one. It was just sort of like, eh. I don't know if that even counts as a spoiler. It was one of those things where we sort of like speculating. We think that might go here.
For the record, I don't think it's going there, but I'm going to let Al be excited over this. We will see you guys next week with episode 5 of season 6.
If you're watching on YouTube, like and subscribe, and leave a comment, whatever kind of comment. You know, tell us what we forgot or what you think about Joffrey-headed mountain.
We pretty much we read everything in the comments. We'll respond. So hit us up, and we will talk to you soon.
Bye, guys.